Hi, y'all. Welcome back to Lit Whiskey Wednesday, where the lit stands for literature. For today's episode, we are covering a whiskey and book pairing that feel like you are walking through a beautiful English mansion, and as you are admiring the stained glass panels and the intricate stonework, you feel almost like a tingle in the back of your neck, almost as if somebody's watching you from afar. On the page, we are talking about a book whose atmosphere feels almost suffocating, where you aren't necessarily afraid of the people in front of you, but it is those that you can't see that are the most dangerous. This is a story that feels like walking through a beautiful house that isn't yours, where everything is polished, perfect, and just a little bit haunting. It's elegant and romantic on the surface, but underneath there is a slow, building tension, like something is off, something is being hidden, and the walls remember more than they should. Of course, I am talking about Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Sorry if I got a little too excited while I was describing the setting of the story, but it's hard not to. As you're reading Rebecca, it is so easy to find yourself immersed into the beautiful yet almost misty gothic setting that is the house Manderley, and almost experiencing what our narrator is experiencing as she describes it. This story is so well written and so descriptive that you feel like you are seeing what the narrator is seeing, that you're feeling the cold, misty air of Manderley as she's walking through the halls. While this book is considered to be a gothic psychological thriller, it's not horror. It is not that traditional scary, because this book is less about what is happening in front of you and more about that anticipation of what could happen, what is around the corner waiting for you. In case you haven't read it, Rebecca is about a young woman who marries the wealthy Maxim de Winter and moves into his beautiful mansion named Manderley, only to find herself living in the shadow of his deceased wife, Rebecca de Winter, whose presence lingers in every corner of the house. So you have heard me talk about Manderley multiple times already, and that's because Manderley is such an important piece of the puzzle that is this novel. Manderley, like I mentioned earlier, is the name of the house that Maxim de Winter owns, and the one that our narrator comes to live in after she marries him. So just as a bit of a heads up, I'm going to be talking about what makes the story so unique, and I'm going to be deep diving in a lot of those plot elements. I'm not going to be giving away any major spoilers or any plot twists, so you're still good to listen to this episode and then read the book, but if you don't want to know anything about this book and read it completely blindly, I suggest that you come back to this episode when you're finished. At the beginning of the book, it opens with one of the most iconic lines in classic literature, in my opinion. "Last night, I dreamt I went to Manderley again." And then the chapter proceeds to describe the narrator's attempt to enter the gated ruins of Manderley. And this chapter just does an incredible job at establishing a haunting, nostalgic, almost dreamlike tone for the novel, which takes a very sharp left turn as we proceed for a little bit. And then we go back in time through the narrator's flashback. And a note here, it is very important that I keep saying narrator, because the narrator, or the woman that marries Maxim de Winter, does not have a name. Throughout the entire book, her name is not said once. Which is kind of interesting, because the house has a proper name, Manderley. That almost tells you the importance of the house to Maxim, to the story as a whole. This house is incredibly important. So in this flashback, the narrator is in the French Riviera because she's accompanying Mrs. Van Hopper, a woman from America that has hired the narrator to be her escort, which sounds kind of dirty, and they actually make a few jokes about that in the book, but has hired the narrator to accompany her wherever she goes, and that was common for the time. So Mrs. Van Hopper is a gossiping socialite that likes to pretend that she knows everybody and has a connection to everybody, and that's how we're introduced to Maxim de Winter. She spots him in the resort that they are staying in at the French Riviera, and tells the narrator a little bit just about him, about how his wife recently passed away, and how he is the owner of the grandiose estate known as Manderley. As time progresses in the French Riviera, our narrator and Maxim de Winter become very close, so much so that he proposes and she says yes. Think about what I'm saying for a moment. They've known each other for like 5 days, and we have this Disney princess moment that, you're the love of my life. I've known you for 5 days. I cannot live without you. Oh yeah, and I was married before. I'm going to give you an engagement ring. Really? Which, I'm no one to judge. I've made my fair share of hasty decisions, but mine look a little bit more like buying jerseys of football teams that I don't even root for, just because they're on sale. Hashtag victim of marketing. So our narrator and Maxim de Winter get married, they go on their honeymoon, and everything's great. We don't see any of that. We get a very abrupt setting shift that goes from the sunny and the warm French Riviera to the cold and misty England. Which, here is where we get the real shift of the tone of the story, because our narrator is introduced to Manderley and introduced to his staff and the horrible Mrs. Danvers. The reason why this is such a shift is because our narrator is not used to any of this. She is used to helping an older woman with her day-to-day tasks, just a much simpler life. But now, she is the mistress of a house that is intimidating just by its sheer size. Not only that, she has a staff. She has a head housekeeper, that being Mrs. Danvers. So our narrator tries her best to fully acclimate into this new lifestyle, but it's so hard for her. Again, she's not used to any of this. She did not know that she was supposed to have a maid. I mean, who going into this life would know that they're supposed to provide their own personal maid? To me, that's just crazy. But it was expected of her. As our narrator begins living in Manderley, she can't help but feel compared to Rebecca. And this leads her to feel almost inadequate to a person that's dead. Almost as if the ghost of this person is taunting her and is telling her, no, you don't belong here. I'm the real mistress of the house. And what makes this just so much more interesting is that this quote-unquote ghost doesn't need to make things go bump in the night to get her message across. She has a staff, and she has Mrs. Danvers, who basically fill in the role as their spokesperson. And what makes that even creepier, side note, slight spoiler alert, it doesn't give away any plot points or any plot twists, but it is kind of a neat part of the story. Mrs. Danvers has almost like a shrine to Rebecca. And this shrine is located on the west wing, which was her room, and it's completely intact, left the way that Rebecca left it when she died. Which serves as a reminder for the narrator and for ourselves that Rebecca, even though she's dead, is everywhere inside this house. So the way that Mrs. Danvers and the staff treat the narrator make her feel just not welcomed, and she's never fully able to adjust. She even has to ask for directions on how to navigate through the house. Which also begs the point, Maxim de Winter completely sets her up for failure. He does not explain any of the expectations on her, does not help introduce her to the house, and doesn't really introduce her to the staff other than, hey, this is my new wife. So, completely sets her up for failure, which kind of leads the narrator to tell Mrs. Danvers, I don't know how to run this house, please run the house the way that Rebecca was running it. Which, in and of itself, turns into a reminder, you, the narrator, which is the mistress of the house, you're not enough. This ghost, this memory of a person, is more of the mistress of the house than you are. Honestly, as I was reading this book, I had no idea who to trust. I didn't feel like I could trust the narrator. I definitely could not trust Maxim, and I 100% knew I could not trust Mrs. Danvers. I think I'm going to leave it there so that I don't give any spoilers to the actual plot or the plot twists. But to just kind of summarize, Rebecca is the type of book where seemingly nothing is wrong, but nothing feels right either. This book, as I was reading it, honestly made me very uncomfortable, but in a very quiet way. And this is because Daphne du Maurier does a great job at describing the slow and creeping sensation of dread. Almost like you are the one walking down the halls of Manderley, feeling that cold, misty air and the eyes in the back of your head watching your every step. Which begs the question, what whiskey feels like it belongs inside of Manderley? I'm so glad you asked. Because the book is so dark and misty, and you're in foggy old England, I knew that the whiskey had to be a Scotch, but I had to match the right one. The Scotch had to be sweet and it had to be polished, almost like representing the initial stages of the relationship between our narrator and Maxim de Winter. But I also knew that the Scotch had to be slightly smoky, almost like representing Rebecca's lingering presence in the background. So after giving it a lot of thought of which Scotch really encapsulates that atmospheric feeling of the book, it finally dawned on me. Let me introduce to you Johnnie Walker Black Ruby. Johnnie Walker Black Ruby is one of the latest releases from the Johnnie Walker distillery, and is actually the first permanent creation from Dr. Emma Walker since she became the master distiller of Johnnie Walker in 2022. This bottle launched in 2025, but there is a bit of a caveat. It is a Scotland-only bottle. You can't find it in the US. The only exception is duty-free shopping at airports, but other than that, you can only get it in Scotland. And the reason I know that is because when I first found out about Johnnie Walker Black Ruby, man, that's a mouthful. But when I first found out about this bottle, I just had to have it. I had to try it. Man, I really am a victim of marketing. But it wasn't until I finally talked to the employee at my local Total Wine when I asked, hey, what's going on with this bottle? And the funny thing is, he had never even heard of it. So we both got on our phones and started looking it up. I don't know why I didn't think of that earlier, but that's how I realized this bottle is only sold in Scotland. So when my wife said that she wanted to go to the UK for her honeymoon, I knew where I had to go. So on one particular day that we were deciding to explore throughout Edinburgh, we decided to just walk. And my wife warned me, I did not listen. If you're planning on going to Edinburgh, it is hilly. So be ready to walk. But we walked throughout Edinburgh and into Dean's Village, which is a beautiful section of the city, and eventually made it to Prince Street, where Johnnie Walker is located. I did not have enough space in my suitcase for a large bottle of Johnnie Walker Black Ruby, but I had to try it and I had to bring some home. So I bought multiple of the little bottles, the airplane 50 milliliters, and that's what we have today. Let's go ahead and open. Oh yeah. I'm so excited for this. The color is actually really interesting, because at first glance it looks almost blondish, but as you put the glass to the light, there's a bit of a red hue. So if I were to describe this whiskey just on looks alone, I would say it's strawberry blonde, which is actually very appropriate with what makes Johnnie Walker Black Ruby unique. It's actually on the way that it's aged. So they get Johnnie Walker Black, which is their staple flagship product, and they age it in a variety of different wine casks. So, for example, they do red wine, they do Oloroso sherry, Pedro Jimenez sherry, and actually there's even bourbon in there. But they age Johnnie Walker Black in these different barrels and then combine it, just blend it, which Johnnie Walker by itself is already a blend. But that's what makes this product so unique. They age it in different casks of wine and bourbon and then just blend it. So let's see how it actually smells and tastes. I already described the look of it as like strawberry blonde, but on the nose, you get very fruity. You get almost like a raspberry jam. Yeah, I think that would be it. Like a berry jam. But on the back end of that nose, there's a little bit of smoke. So it's actually really interesting. It's almost kind of layered, which makes a lot of sense because you do get that smoke from the fact that it's a Scotch, from the fact that it is Johnnie Walker Black. But aging it in those wine barrels gives it that very strong forward smell of fruits. Let's give it a little taste. On the palate, it's interesting. It's definitely layered because at the very front you get almost like maraschino cherries, and again like very fruity. But then as you let it sit in your mouth, you get some almost like a vanilla, like a very sweet flavor, and that makes sense because part of the blend was aged in ex-bourbon barrels, so it makes perfect sense as to why you would get that sweetness. On the back end, though, you get a hint of smoke, which makes perfect sense given that this is Johnnie Walker Black, just, with an added layer. So I think that this whiskey, or rather this Scotch, makes a perfect pairing with Rebecca. Initially, it is vibrant. It is great. And not that the second half is great. It's a little darker. It's a little smokier, a little misty. And the interesting thing is that smoky note doesn't really go away. When you first take a sip of the Scotch, that fruity flavor just kind of punches you in the face and it stays there and it's like, oh hey, it's very vibrant. But then the smoke slowly settles and it's there to stay. Kind of like in Rebecca, where the smokiness almost represents her presence. It's not loud, but it doesn't really leave. So the thing about Johnnie Walker is that a lot of people use this whiskey to make drinks, to make mixed drinks. And that's exactly what we're going to do. I will be right back with some ingredients. And through the magic of editing, I am back just like that. So let me tell you what I got. I muddled the strawberry and some honey into a little bit of a secret ingredient, which I may or may not tell you. Let's see how this goes. Along with some club soda, and then I will pour the Johnnie Walker Black Ruby into here. So I already got the strawberry, the honey, and the secret ingredient muddled in here with some ice cubes. Pouring in the club soda. And then we are pouring the Scotch. I think I might need a little bit more. There we go. Salud. Oh, that's good. That's dangerous. Oh, that's actually really good. So, let's keep up the tradition from the Harry Potter episode of making a mixed drink. And I am going to call this Manderley. So that is just about what I have for today. Rebecca is about what lingers when someone is gone. In this whiskey, it lingers the exact same way. But please tell me in the comments down below, have you read Rebecca? What did you think? And what other whiskey would you use to pair with this book? This has been Lit Whiskey Wednesday, where the lit stands for literature. I am your host, Adrian Martinez, coming to you live from Studio B. Thank you again for following, for subscribing, for liking, for leaving your comments, for everything that y'all do. I highly appreciate it. I'll catch you on the next one.